Hello, I'm Adrian Ashton, and this is tutorial number 5 in the social enterprise specialism of this course that you're currently working your way through. Now, the subject for this tutorial is about legal structures and governance forms that social enterprises can adopt, can be created within, can become as part of their being, their birthing, they're getting out into the world. Legal forms, often a bit like with accounting, are seen to be something which a lot of people think, I don't know enough. This is all legal stuff. It's way above my head. But actually, for a social enterprise, their legal form is a crucial aspect that will determine their future success. And so what we wanted to do in this tutorial, in the materials, is take you through some of the background to thinking about why is it specifically that a social enterprise should pay particular interest and put a lot of time into thinking about the way it should structure itself legally. And then also some of the options that exist in summary. And then finally, some of that further reading, which will include links to materials, further guides, and also within those guides, some kind of activities to help you kind of go through some multiple choice questions to understand better how the social enterprise legal form can impact on its ability to work in different ways in the future. Now, very often, social enterprises are presented as saying, oh, social enterprises, they're KICs, community interest companies. And there is a growing trend over the last few years for social enterprises to incorporate as KICs, community interest companies. And that's in part because a few years ago, government introduced the KIC as a new legal form specifically for social enterprises. However, as we've already clarified through previous tutorials in this specialism, there is no specific overarching legal definition for what a social enterprise is. A social enterprise is recognized by 3 characteristics: social purpose, a restriction on the distribution of profits, and an asset lock. Now, those 3 things can be created and embedded and protected within over a dozen different legal forms. The KIC forms only a small part of them. So always take your time in understanding the choice. Ultimately as well, so many social entrepreneurs say, oh, we picked our legal form on the basis that that's what we saw someone else had done. Or we spoke to an advisor from a program and they said that's what we should be. So we just took it at face value. With regards to your legal form, anyone who offers you advice, the starting point in your relationship with that person as a coach, a mentor, an advisor, a consultant should be, I don't trust you. And you shouldn't trust them because they are simply giving you a view, an idea, which is theirs. And you shouldn't trust them because whatever you choose to adopt as a legal form, you, the social entrepreneurs who've created that social enterprise, will be legally accountable for it, not the consultant or the advisor. If they advise you badly, you're stuck with it, not them. It's just like if your accountant messes up your accounts, it's your problem, not your accountant's problem. It seems a bit perverse, I've always thought, but anyway. So social enterprises can adopt one of many legal forms. And what I always say, and we kind of explore this in the tutorial materials, is there are maybe, rather than go through, here's all the 12, 14, 16 options and melt your brain and make you even more confused, let's actually do a bit of advanced sifting to begin with. Let's ask some questions about what kind of social enterprise you want to have in terms of its governance and in terms of its financing and in terms of how it wants to trade in the future. So these things, governance is often a kind of, a very heavy word, a very weighted word, a lot of baggage. Governance broadly relates to the sorts of relationships and the way that you're going to work with different people in an enterprise. It's about accountability. It's about being validated. So the questions that I would ask you are sort of 5-fold, and we cover these in the materials. The first is credibility. Who do you need to impress? Because the legal form you adopt has different implications with how you are viewed by different audiences. For example, public sector commissioners will say, oh, we would expect a social enterprise to present itself as a KIC, a community interest company. It doesn't increase your chances of winning the contract, but it does make you immediately more attractive to them because you've met their expectation of you. Put it that way. H, the stories, history and the stories that people tell about you. The legal form that you adopt has different implications with regard to how you can operate, how you have to engage with different groups of people. That affects your branding. So back to tutorial 4. Accountability. Whom should the enterprise be accountable to? And by that, I mean, who validates it? Who gives that social enterprise the assurance on a regular basis, maybe that's every month or every year, yes, you're doing the right things. You're the right people in its leadership positions to carry on leading it. It's heading in the right direction. Where's that kind of rubber stamping process going on? And who does it sit with? Should it sit with some regulatory body, so on a legal basis, or should it sit with a community of people or a community of area? M is about money. What kind of money should this social enterprise be able to draw in and attract? Should it be able to borrow money? Should it be able to issue shares? And then finally, P is about power and authority. Where in the social enterprise should authority and decision making sit? How does it work out? So those are the 5 broad domains of this. And once a social enterprise or a group of would-be social entrepreneurs is clearer about those preferences for how they believe the social enterprise should be structured and able to work and operate, it's then much easier to look at that full list of legal options and choices and work out which are the best ones. Equally important is to work out which are not the best ones. Because just as we touched upon in this idea of tutorial 4 and the issue of marketing and branding and values, if a social enterprise is not clear as to why it did not choose a particular legal form, if it has a conversation with someone, say a commissioner or investor, who says, oh, but I thought social enterprises were supposed to be KICs or charities or societies. And the social enterprise cannot refute that and say, yes, we're aware of that option and we looked at it and it wasn't right for us because ... It will lose credibility. It will lose the ability to be seen as trusted in the eyes of that person. And that person will then start to tell stories outside to say, oh, they didn't really know what they're talking about. And so the enterprise loses out. So that's the kind of idea about thinking about how we approach this. The technicality, though, of incorporation is quite important. And I wanted to touch upon this in a few angles. So firstly, a social enterprise has to be incorporated. And by that, we mean it takes on a legal form. It incorporates. The process of incorporation says a social enterprise becomes an entity that is distinct in law. It becomes essentially a legal person. Now that's important for a number of reasons. One is about risk. Now the risk is if a social enterprise trades as unincorporated, it's just a bunch of people getting along together, and maybe they've got a constitution that says this is what we're going to try and do and how we're going to try and work it. I mean, we've got a bank account, but that's it. We're not structured in any way. We're not registered as a legal form with anyone. If something goes bump, if something goes bang, if something goes wrong, then those people who are involved in leading it and managing it become personally liable. They risk losing the shirt off their back. They risk being personally sued. And that's a very dangerous and tenuous and exposed position to ask people to put themselves in. So as a social enterprise starts to take on risk, as it starts to become involved in contracts and employing people, it's a really good idea to incorporate itself, to give its people a layer of protection. The other reason a social enterprise should incorporate itself to take on a legal structure is actually a much bigger reason than that. So let's wind back to the earlier tutorials and say, let's remind ourselves about those defining characteristics, 3 defining characteristics of social enterprise. The only way that those can be embedded and protected legally and robustly within a social enterprise is if it is incorporated. If the social enterprise becomes accountable and reports to a legal regulatory body of some type, Companies House, the KIC regulator. And that regulatory body will act as a safeguard, as an oversight to make sure that that social enterprise carries on being a social enterprise. That the people involved now or in the future can't subvert it. They can't change its rules. They can't present themselves as a social enterprise and then actually at the back be ripping all the money out for themselves and subverting it and exploiting it. So that's really important to put it that way. The other thing about the process of incorporation that it's useful to point out is about membership. Okay, so this is kind of where we get a bit technical. So in an incorporated organization, there are 2 levels. of governance or structure. There is the board. In a charity, they're called the trustees. In a company, they're called the directors. And the board are appointed by a membership, a group of people underneath. Now, this dates back in a bit of history. Historically, companies were always formed by large groups of people who wanted the opportunity to invest their money for a return, to make a profit, to be shared amongst themselves. There were always more people, shareholders, who came together than could reasonably collectively manage a business. So they appointed a board. You have these two tiers: members, the owners of a business, and the directors, the people who they appoint to run it on their behalf. In many social enterprises, those members are the same people as the directors. They double up. Okay? That's okay. You can take on two identities. Within a social enterprise, it's important to think about, when you're thinking about those first questions: credibility, history, accountability, money, and power, that accountability question and that power question. Who do you share that power with as the members? Because the membership is ultimately where the real power sits and lies within an organization. Because it's the members who decide who should be directors or not. It's the members who decide, yes, we should make some changes to our governing document, our rules, or not. It's the members who say, yep, our accounts are good, they're fine, we can submit them and we can remain legal and compliant. And it's the members who decide it's time to wind this up, pack up shop, wind it down, and go off and have another adventure somewhere else. Members are where the power really sits within an organization. So it's really important for a social enterprise to be clear. Who are its members and who are its directors in leading that, or its trustees or its board? And what's the relationship between them? If they're the same people, that's fine. But how is it going to put a process in place to reassure itself that it's not losing track, it's not going off on a tangent? Now, this is where different legal forms offer different options and benefits and implications. For example, excuse me, the community interest company was formed as a flexible way for social entrepreneurs to incorporate a social enterprise and go out to the market. What that means is a small group of people could come together, register a kick, and then go off and start trading in it. Now, there's a concern that says, but hang on a minute, where's the safeguard? Because kicks don't have to have wider memberships. They don't have to be accountable. They don't have to legally involve their community in any way. So the regulator, the kick regulator, has certain powers that it can use to protect and safeguard the purpose of that social enterprise. And so the kick regulator has the power that says we can remove and appoint directors of a kick if we think they're the wrong people or we think they're going a bit bad. We can tell a kick that it can't develop those new trading things that it wants to if we feel that they're not quite in keeping with its original vision. And if the kick really starts misbehaving and starts really messing about with the money, then we as the kick regulator can sue other people to get the assets and the money back into that kick for that social purpose, to protect it. Because that kick brand, the identity of a social enterprise, is really important. So we think about it that way, and that introduces the dimension of the regulators above the legal form a social enterprise chooses. So it's not just about what's this legal form and what does it allow you to do in terms of the flexibility about, can you have a director, can they be paid, should they be voluntary? Are we a legal form that looks quite attractive to certain audiences or not? But also, how are we beholden to that regulator? What kind of regulator do we want to have? Do we want a regulator who can be that draconian, such as the kick regulator can be or could be? Or do we want a regulator who's going to be a bit more light touch and more flexible and accommodating and understanding, like Companies House? Because the research shows us that the majority of social enterprises are limited companies. Straightforward. And Companies House, as the regulator, say, yep, keep your paperwork going in on time, that's fine. And the social enterprise can say to Companies House, oh, by the way, we've got these little identifiers in our governing document, our articles of association, as they're called. And so could you please keep an eye on them, make sure that no one in the future can change these identifying characteristics of a social enterprise. And that's it. Crack on. So there's an interesting dimension to think about. How does the legal form that a social enterprise adopts affect its credibility and how it's seen with other people? How does it affect the way that it can access finance in the future? For example, charities have more doors that they can knock on to apply for grants, but companies can still apply for a lot of grants as well. And protection. Does that social enterprise say, actually, we want a regulator who will be really powerful over us in terms of protecting that vision and purpose? Or do we want a regulator who will trust us and just let us get on with it more, to work it through that way? Ultimately, the only way you can work this out and follow it through is to research these things. And this is why in the tutorial, there's lots of extra links in terms of reading through. There's a link to another webinar that explores this in a bit more detail. But I would always encourage you, particularly around this question, because the legal implications are such, to make a properly informed decision, to look at the research. And there's various pieces of research about legal forms for social enterprises. So within the tutorials, we make reference to Social Enterprise UK. Every 2 years, they do a map of the social enterprise sector, and they ask social enterprises, what is the legal form that you have adopted? And they look at that every 2 years, and so you can see trends and patterns. How are different legal forms becoming more popular or less popular in the wider sector? And it works in other ways as well. So the Community Interest Company Association, effectively a club for kicks that they get together around. A few years ago, they ran a survey just on community interest companies, saying, how have you found this legal form? How is it working for you or not working for you? And the KIC regulator every year also does research into KIC's experiences of being that legal form as well, and how it's worked or not. And then alongside that, different grant-making bodies also publish research about what's the typical profile of groups, social enterprises, who apply to us for funding or investment according to their legal form. So if you take in all these different views, all of a sudden, you start to get insight. For example, the KIC form, the Community Interest Company form, is often presented as the ideal choice for a social enterprise to adopt. But as we've picked up, the KIC regulator is quite powerful, if it wants to be, in protecting that purpose. And the research alongside it actually finds that the reason that most KICs are wound up is because they couldn't access grants in the way that they thought they could, or they were told they could. That a significant number of them have found that that legal form does not actually help them achieve their social purpose in the way that they thought it would. That it's been a hindrance, not a help. And that the typical profile, the typical turnover of a community interest company, a social enterprise that's incorporated, taken on the structure of a KIC, is only about £10,000 a year. So they're quite small, most of them. However, the difficulty with research is it looks at the grand scheme of things only. There will always be outliers to that. There will always be some KICs who are stratostrophic. They're unicorns. They've got millions of pounds of turnover. They're being really successful. There'll be some KICs who aren't. The same with charities. What I'd always encourage people to do as social enterprises is to say there's lots of different options. There's lots of different flexibility within them. Whatever people tell you, oh, you should be a this, you should be a that, always look at the research. Always see what are other people doing, what's been their experience as a social enterprise, and then to take it back, link back to your previous tutorials and the learnings from that. How do these different legal forms allow you, this social enterprise, to access finance in different ways? How are they more or less credible or attractive to different audiences in terms of your marketing? How do they allow you to protect and manifest your chosen values or ethics or not? Going back to some of those previous tutorials as well. So legal structures and governance models around social enterprise can seem quite heavyweight. Hopefully this video introduction has helped to give you some grounding and some context for that, and to give you some pointers to start to think about how you can more comfortably and maybe less painfully in terms of brain power start to approach it, to know what questions to ask. So rather than just say, okay, we'll read about companies, what questions do you have about companies? And then when you read about them, you can pull out the information and understand those options slightly better.